Of all the cases inside the umbrella of Missing 411, few stand out as truly strange. One such case involves Tom Messick, a lifelong hunter who went out on a hunting trip with 6 other men, walked out into the forest, and never was ever seen again. With no realistic explanation given by law enforcement and the presence of federal authorities on the case, questions begin to mount and conspiracies begin to rise. Amongst them are theories of alien abductions, portals to other realms, and Bigfoot abductions. We are the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization, and tonight we're delving into the mystery of Tom Messick. My name's Jaster Lanewin, and coming with me tonight is our other investigator, Myth. How are you doing tonight, bud?
I'm blessed, brother. I'm blessed.
Well, good. So, tonight we're going to go into one of the big, weird Missing 411 cases. It's one that's been recommended to us on the show, and we wanted to get a better understanding of our research criteria and our process before we tackle big cases like this. So, first, let's go over some criteria that we looked at, some research, and some citations. So, to preface all this, because this is an open police investigation, there's no official police reports on this case that are publicly available. All information available on this case comes mostly from David Paulides, who had done a lot of interviewing work on this case for Missing 411 The Hunted. Backup interviews on the police part of the investigation was done by the Lord's Lodge YouTube channel, but a lot of the rest of this publicly available information was found via local news. So, let's go ahead and get into it. On November 15th, around 1 o'clock, Tom Messick and a hunting group of 6 other hunters went to Lily Pond Lake, just north of Brant Lake, in the Adirondack Mountain Range of New York. Now, what they did was they were going to park their cars, and I'm going to bring up the Google Maps right here. So we have his last known location pinned. So from what we understand, the trucks parked on Lily Pond or Grassville Road right here, and they lined up into 2 groups. So one group of the hunters were going to form a line parallel with the road here, and they were going to move about 30 to 40 yards into the road, where Tom Messick was the last one in the line, so the farthest one away from the trucks as he moved in. Now, the other group of hunters were going to go across the ridgeline closer to over in this area where my mouse is at, and they would push the deer into the line of hunters that would be right here. Now, is all this making sense, Myth?
I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I apologize.
No, you're good. So, what ended up happening when these guys went out, according to everybody on this hunting party, the woods were eerily quiet. Like, they didn't really see any wildlife, didn't have anything out there to hunt, really. And this was admittedly kind of a late hunt. Whenever you do deer hunting, you tend to go out earlier in the morning because that's whenever they start getting up and moving and doing all of their stuff is early in the morning. And it's a lot easier to catch them unawares or have them in an area where known deer locations are at. That tends to happen earlier. Now, with this being a later hunt, they didn't really see anything. Like they said, though, the weirdest part about this is that the woods were completely bereft of wildlife. A further note to compound this is that when the searchers went out later, they also made note that there was like nothing going on. And they couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. It was weird. So they push these hunters. They push towards the other group of hunters on the line. And nothing really happens. So they go to rendezvous back at the trucks. It was at this point that they realize that Tom is gone. And they don't know where he went. So immediately they go out to his last known location, which we have down here pinned on the map, and they don't see hide nor hair of the man. Now, he was last seen with a hunting cap, a camouflage jacket, and let me go look at the missing persons thing. He had camo jacket pants with a red and black hat. That's about the physical description that they had for what he had wearing. He had his hunting rifle with him. Apparently, he had some snacks, a Snickers bar or something like that, some sort of candy bar. However, another big thing to note about Tom was that he was missing he was basically visually impaired in his right eye. That's what it says. But he had an accident some years before where it basically looks like he kind of blew out his eye in a way. Now, when he went missing, he was 82 years old, and it was also known that he had some heart problems. So, whenever they realized, oh crap, we can't find him, they split into two groups. So, one would go back and notify the rangers and make sure things were going and were okay down at the camp, and if he went back to the campsite, they would be able to find him there. The other ones would keep looking in the woods until the rangers arrived and a search party could get started. Now, much like other cases that we've researched here, they've had hunting dogs out, they had search and rescue teams, they had members of local police out there, and nothing could be found of Tom at all. Which, this is where things get really weird, because we've got 6 witnesses that he was there that day, no evidence that the man was there at all, and whenever hunting dogs or search dogs were out trying to find a scent for the man, they couldn't find anything at all. And to this day, he's still missing. We've never had any evidence collected that he was in the area to this day. There's never been any remains found in the area, and this is a pretty well-known but still rural part of the Adirondack mountain range. So it's kind of hard, even today, by missing person standards, that there hasn't been any missing evidence found. There's been plenty of other times that people have went missing in the woods and something had turned up. Either a boot, the hunting camp, something had always turned up. In this case, nothing. Now, other things that come up that make this case a little bit strange. According to Tom's wife, the FBI came in about 3 days into the investigation, and whenever she asked, she was like, what's going on? They said something wasn't right with the case, and they were looking into it. Now, that was about all that they had on the FBI working that. However, it also sounds like the Department of Homeland Security was helping run operational communications for the search and rescue team. That's also a little weird. Now, we still don't have anything about Tom, right? So, Myth, what's your initial take on what's going on here?
Okay, so it was speculated that it very well could be a Bigfoot encounter that had happened, that, he got swept up by Bigfoot. I'm looking at it from a different perspective, different lens. I'm saying he was an 82-year-old man, and he was blind in one eye. And all the other things that we do know about it, such as there was a metallic clanking that was heard in his last known location. I don't see why, if he's hunting with a rifle and they're looking for signs of Bigfoot, why there would be a metallic clanking unless, there was him clashing with someone else or something else that should have been in that area. But when they went to look for him, there was no trace of anything. There were no tracks, nothing to follow. There was no blood. So I'm leaning towards the idea of foul play or like unexplainable disappearance by natural causes. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. My theory is this. This is not my only theory, but this is the theory we're going to go with for right now, is that maybe he fell against some inanimate object that was left out there in the wilderness from previous hunts by another hunter, by himself, whatever, hit his head, became delirious, and started to just walk off somewhere in a different direction. But the problem with that is, like I said, there were no tracks. There was nothing that could, give them a distinct following pattern to where he is or where his last known location really should be. So there's so many missing pieces of this that we have to look at when we're talking about it, that we really need to break everything down into small segments so that we can digest everything. And I'm going to pass this back to Jaster because he's really great at that.
So first, let's break down why it's weird and why the FBI might have been involved, right? So whenever you look through all of the available reasons why he might have went missing, there's a good reason as to believe that maybe foul play was involved, because there is no real explanation as to how something might have gotten to him and gotten him out without some amount of scattering or some amount of animal predation signs outside of something at least human-like. Something would have had to snatch him without making him bleed or making him drop anything and just getting him out of there, right? If this was a abduction case in some sort of way, right? Now,
right.
It doesn't sound like they heard anything. I mean, not even a car, not dragging, nothing. Like, they said that the woods were eerily quiet. Now, that is something that people also attribute to Bigfoot encounters. Like, before they hear or see something, the woods go dead quiet, right? That's something that the police even said whenever they were doing their part of the investigation. And whenever the Lore Lodge went up sometime later, they were even like, yeah, it's not like the most active woods that time of the year that they went, but they still heard woodland noises. Like, it wasn't dead quiet. So it was definitely something contextually weird to the area at the time of the disappearance, right? Now, why would people think he'd have been abducted in some other sort of paranormal fashion, right? Like, some of the people that are on more of the flute player side of the argument, I would guess, or the alien abduction side of the argument, kind of lean more towards the theory of an alien abduction or a portal in some sort of way. Like him just disappearing like I don't know, maybe like a closet in a Narnia kind of thing, like except on the opposite side. You know, how to go from Narnia back into the real world, I guess. I'm not entirely sure how they think about that. However, there's a lot of stuff going on here that makes them think about the paranormal, right? Because there's not a lot of logical explanations. And the police had thoroughly investigated everybody that was involved that day when he went missing, and they don't suspect anybody. The other thing is like, because it's an open investigation, we can't get a FOIA request out there to get the police reports, to get their notes on the investigation. And whenever David Paulides went in and asked for it, they're like, no, can't really do that. Now, it's also weird whenever the FBI gets involved in an adult missing persons case out in the woods, because generally foul play has to be suspected in some way. The other thing that really struck me as weird, and a lot of other people that research this case does too, is that, man, 3 days was not a long time for the FBI to show up. It was almost like they were looking in that area of the United States for missing people. Like, why? I think Lore Lodge goes into it a little bit better, but there are a greater cluster of missing people within the Adirondack mountain range, which might be related to some sort of serial activity. Now, the other reasons why the FBI would be involved would be interstate travel, serial activity, or foul play, all that other kind of stuff, right? Like I said, it's not weird for people to think that this is weird. You know what I mean, Myth?
Yes.
So, let's break into the dog situation, because I think it's a little bit more relevant to bring this up now than I think before we start really getting too much farther into this series. So the use of dogs for search and rescue is a valuable tool for 90% of cases where people are going into the woods and they're just hikers or they're kids on a field trip or something to that effect, right? Because they have an active scent dispersal. Now, what does that mean? That means whatever scent your body is generating is wafting out into the atmosphere, right? And scent dogs can pick up on that trail and go very long distances with that. Now, if you're sweating, or if you drop something, that is an active scent maker that a dog can also pick up on, right? Now, why does this matter? Like, when you're a hunter, you're using a lot of scent elimination technology in order to mask your scent from the prey that you're hunting. Now, that has a reverse effect of also making it harder for dogs to track you, at least certain types of dogs, because there is an active component trying to eliminate your scent dispersal. Now, if you were sweating or you dropped something out there that has your scent on it, that kind of negates that, and that allows for dogs to track you. But, like it comes back to before in the investigation, nothing was found. The dogs couldn't scent to anything. I don't know if cadaver dogs were brought in particular for this case, but like I said, in the years afterwards, like 11 years later, nobody has ever found anything in the area. That makes me think, like, was he ever there? Like, was this some sort of ploy or some sort of plan?
Hoax.
Like, I think about it this way, right? Because, like, I know this might get a bit macabre. However, for people that live in the country, whose parents have lived in the country their whole lives, very self-sustainable people, right? They might not like to think about the idea of rotting away in an old folks' home, right? Now, Tom seems like a very salt-of-the-earth individual. A lot of people said that he taught almost every hunter in the area how to be a hunter. Like, multiple generations of people in the area learned from Tom, building a lot of trust with this group of individuals. Maybe they came up with a plan that allowed him to walk out, so to speak, on his own terms. Now, what does that mean? Like, how would they get that done? Like, it could be completely possible that they just told everybody that he went over here, this was where we got it done, like we were hunting here, and he disappeared. And then the whole time he went off to go somewhere else. That's possible. Maybe it didn't have to be everybody involved. Who knows? I would say if he was never there in the first place, then everybody would have to be involved in that in order for the story to corroborate with police reports and not be suspected in any way. But if the plan was for him to walk out there, then not everybody would have to be involved. You know what I'm saying? So that is an interesting way to look at it. I think, like I said, I think the odds are him never being there have to be lower because of the more amount of people that are involved in that kind of a conspiratorial act. A lot of people, eventually someone's going to talk, you know? It's like, what's the old adage myth? It's like, it's only a secret until someone else knows about it.
Yes.
So something might have came out, something would have probably have come out, right? If somebody else was in on this whole situation and he walked out and somebody else helped him, it's probably more likely that it was an individual member or multiple individual members of the hunting party, but not all of them. Now, we're not really going to speculate on who, because that's it's a little too far, in my opinion. But I think there's some thoughts to go on there, and I think that's a large reason why probably the FBI was involved in the first place, is because the way that the man walked out, according to everybody, doesn't necessarily align with motives or with what actually happened or the corroborating evidence, right? And they have no real evidence. They have no real evidence the man was even really there, right? I can understand why the FBI would get involved there. Now, let's get into the Bigfoot stuff, right? Because me and Myth were looking into, you know, what kind of Bigfoot things go on in this part of the world, right? So initially we were looking and zooming in really close to find the Lily Pond area, which is, let me right here on the map. Now, this doesn't really have a whole lot in it until you start zooming out towards the Lake George area. Now, there are some things that have happened over the years here. We're going to bring up a couple. We've got one sighting in 2001. We've got another sighting in 1990 over here. And this is all on the Bigfoot mapping project, by the way. We've got another one in 1999. But there's nothing real crazy in the immediate area It looks like we've got a vocalization report over here. Let's look at that one real quick. That's 2006. So the other thing is, like, you zoom out a little bit farther, the plot starts to thicken. So there's a town right on the other side of Lake George from where Tom Messick went missing that has a whole lot more to do with Bigfoot. And as soon as I seen this, it suddenly clicked as to why people really think Bigfoot might have had something to do with this. It's because we're looking at the town of Whitehall, New York, which is one of the biggest hotspots for Bigfoot activity in the Northeast. It's the sighting report area for the Whitehall monster, which in that report, a couple of teenage boys saw something weird on the side of the road. I'm paraphrasing pretty hard here. And they called the police. They got a hold of the police. Multiple police precincts showed up to the area along with a state trooper. So we have 3 different police departments responding to this call, and they see the thing again. That's a pretty significant Bigfoot sighting for anybody that's really deep in the mud here in the Bigfoot world. However, that's not the only one. And we can pull up a couple here really quick. Let's make sure I'm not crazy. So this one happened, yep. So we've got one that happened in September of 2015 where a couple of people were having bonfires at their parents' house and they heard some vocalizations. And then the next night, the dog started barking. Everything went quiet. So they got a little nervous and stayed out. And then they heard what they thought was a large tree break. So again, they heard another tree break a little bit farther to the southwest. And then they put out one of the fires. And then they went inside. And then they went home. And then a few nights later, around midnight, they were sitting in the car with their windows open. And her dad came out to tell her something had turned on the light, like a motion security light in the air conditioner so that we cannot see and hear. So they decided to call it a night. They saw something come out into the headlights as they were pulling out onto the road when they went to leave. According to them, about 50 yards off the road, they saw this tall, lean, rusty orange hair-covered creature. Let me rephrase that. So about 50 yards off the road is this big, tall, lean, rusty orange hair-covered creature who raised its hand over its eyes and squatted down as its headlights centered on it. The witness froze, trying to think of a logical explanation to what they were seeing, and then panicked, stepped on the gas, and drove on home. There's another report that's pretty close to that time frame as well. Let me zoom around a little bit and see what's going on. Okay, so we've got another one. This one's with the BFRO. This is report 2704. And this happened in January of 1981 in Whitehall, New York. We've got another one that you can find. Let me look over here. We got one in 2022 where someone saw an 8-foot tall creature. So the list goes on here, is that we are in Bigfoot country. Okay, and as far as locals go and how they think, whenever someone goes missing out in the wilderness, somebody's going to eventually kind of come to the conclusion, hey, has anybody thought about Bigfoot? While we do have reports in the same year, not necessarily the same time frame. We've got, I think the closest we were able to find was a report 6 months before Tom went missing, but it was also in the Whitehall area on the other side of Lake George from the area that Tom went missing. So that one's kind of hard. Whenever we think about these things and we try to think about them logically, it's like, do we have reports of things that are in the immediate area, in the immediate time frame? That's the easiest way to pin anything of significance on the conversation, and we don't. So I'm not really feeling the Bigfoot aspect. I do find it really weird that there is no evidence. It basically seems like Tom sat down and promptly disappeared. I'm kind of more of the theory that he either had a medical episode, and because unlike other hunts, this was an area that he did not frequent. He did not necessarily know these woods like he had known the rest of the part of the Brant Lake area. Maybe he got disoriented, and maybe when he went back to rendezvous with the truck, he went the wrong direction. It's completely possible. The other thing is like an 85-year-old man with hearing aids and issues with seeing out of one eye, having heart condition issues. I don't know if I would have put him that far away from the trucks, you know? To be respectful, like, that's a hard one. I would probably want him closer to the trucks, even though, yeah, he's an older guy. He's the one that taught everybody in the hunting group how to hunt. But don't let the man walk 400 yards to the away to the trucks. That seems like an heart. That sounds like a problem with someone with a heart issue, and he's 85. I know that a lot of reports say that he was pretty sharp and he was pretty well active, but that's still a risk. You know what I mean? I think that the more likely explanations, the one that are less supernatural, are the ones that probably have a little bit more weight to them right now. Where he might have had a medical episode, wandered around, got disoriented, and went in the wrong direction, but managed to get out of the search area to the point where nobody has ever seen any evidence of him. There's been missing persons cases that have been solved from remains that have been discovered so far away that they just get registered as missing remains found. And it takes somebody else to cover the distance and connect the dots and see what really happened. There was one case of somebody went missing from a runaway case, I believe, and they were in one state, they ended up in another, and her remains were listed on the national website for all of that for years, and nobody was able to identify this woman until the internet did. I think it was like 9 years ago or something like that. It happens. So, like, who knows? I just don't necessarily think it was supernatural. I do think there was a huge red flag with no wildlife going on, as somebody who's lived in the woods for a lot of my childhood and hunting and fishing in the woods my whole childhood and a lot of my adult life. Whenever the woods is dead quiet, you've got a problem, because humans don't make that reaction in the woods. Whenever you walk out in the woods, people, like, the birds are talking about you, things happen, it's not that crazy, right? Whenever the entire ecosystem decides to bed down and shut up, that means something that they don't understand is in the area. Doesn't necessarily mean a cryptid. That could be any member of the ecosystem that doesn't normally frequent that area would elicit a similar response. For example, if you were in southern Indiana and all of a sudden a mountain lion's in the area, which if you live there, you know that is a possibility. They're not necessarily well known in the area. The government doesn't really like to talk about it. So you don't really get a whole lot of people that know if you go out deer hunting in southern Indiana, you might have a mountain lion out there. But that's the same stuff that happens. If there's a mountain lion that comes up in the woods over there, everything goes quiet, because nothing in there is normally seeing a giant cat wandering through the woods. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be supernatural. However, there were enough red flags in the woods that day to maybe fold him in closer to other members of the hunting party, or maybe closer to the truck in general. I'm going to back this up a little bit. Like, Myth, am I sounding crazy real quick? Or what do you think?
No, I was going to say just the concept. So, like I said earlier, the concept of him wandering off after becoming delirious or having a medical episode is probably the strongest one we can go with. But I have to counter it. I have to. It would make no logical sense for me to not say exactly what I said earlier. If that happened, why can't we pick up on the scent? Why were there no tracks? Especially if the wilderness is quiet, it's telling you to listen. It's telling you that something's wrong, like Jaster said. So 9 times out of 10, you absolutely have to pay attention to what's going on. But for an older man who already struggles with his hearing, his sight, and just has all these different handicaps, it makes no feasible sense for anybody to put him 400 yards away from any functional vehicle or any other person that can see him, knowing that there are issues. And so the biggest thing is I can't lean into the supernatural on this. My heart and my sense is telling me it's a foul play thing. The what was it? The CIA, the government's involvement, all of it. It's
The
just so many
FBI,
different.
not the CIA.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The FBI, and just like having them involved as quickly. That doesn't happen with cases for adults, not that quickly. That's usually for like if a kid goes missing, they're immediately on it. For a grown man to go missing, they're not paying it that much attention. Not as much as they would as a child because it's more serious. It's more of a like, hey, my kid's missing. Somebody help me with this. But if you tell somebody, like, I'll give you an example right now. If I go missing right now, and say my wife goes to the police station and says, hey, my husband's been missing for a day. They're not doing anything until next week, guaranteed. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because that's not as serious as if one of my children were missing from my home.
Well, I mean, so that's not always the case anymore, and there's a lot more laws that make that to where missing persons cases do have to have an associated response immediately now. And that's because of like Adam's law, where like a 19-ish-year-old man was basically went missing out of nowhere. The parents had enough evidence to say, hey, we don't think he went missing on accident or on purpose, I'm sorry, and we need you to look into this. And they're like, he could have just ran away. And they missed an initial period of investigation where they could have got critical evidence or possibly recovered the man, and they never did. So now there's a lot more laws in place in order to make a missing persons case have to be looked at more seriously. But I understand what you mean. Like, thankfully they were on there pretty quick. It wasn't like they took extra time for him to get looked for, but it was kind of like too much that they weren't able to get anything. Like, I get the dogs not being able to pick up anything if he had a bunch of odor eliminator stuff, but like, no wrapper, no candy wrapper, no, the gun was missing, nothing. Like, I think there are a couple of missing 411 cases where they were able to recover people, but when they did find their body or they did recover them, they were a long way away from where they went missing, and not necessarily a long amount of time. It's kind of wild what happens whenever the brain goes into overdrive like that, and they get into that adrenaline, and they don't know where they're going. They just know they have to go somewhere, right? And that's, by the way, not what you do when you're missing in the woods, especially when people know where you're at. If that ever happens to you, you need to stay put. Like, yeah, that sucks. You need to burn a lot of that off, maybe, but you need to utilize that time frame where you're burning with energy to like set up a shelter or some way of signaling that you are missing and you are here. But that doesn't always happen. A lot of people get like, oh, well, I'm not too far away from the trail. I know I'm not. I can just go find it. And you might not. A lot of people don't when they go missing. So that's why a lot of people say when you do go missing, you need to stay put. And if anything, if you know you're going to be there overnight or something to that effect, you need to build a camp or something. You need to get yourself situated in a way to allow yourself a higher chance of survival when you're missing. Like I said, it keeps going back to he just looked like he vanished into thin air. And so, like I said, I think we're going to go with the outlook that maybe Tom was never there in the first place. Because when you got the context of the totality of the clues, the local folklore, what people say, all of those kind of things, and then the effort that the police went through, and whenever you bring up things like what was brought up in the original movie of Missing 411, all of the information presented by him, and then all of the cross-checked information and what we've got in the middle here, right? All the verified information is that this dude literally has no evidence of being here in the first place. So that leads you to believe that maybe he really wasn't, and maybe we're looking in the wrong place. And that means maybe the key to Tom Messick's disappearance is maybe some remains found in another park or in some other part of New York or in the Adirondack Mountains that went unidentified. Because everybody's expecting Tom to be in the Brant Lake, Lake George area. However, our thinking is maybe he's not there at all. And in order to maybe get a little farther in this case, we got to expand the search area out a little bit more. Because the thought keeps coming into my mind that he probably wanted to go out on his own terms. And if he really wanted to do that, and for people not to find you and not to have to worry about it like that or see you like that, you would probably send them in the wrong direction in the first place and then go somewhere else where you're not going to be found. That makes more sense to me. But do you have any closing thoughts on this one, Myth?
No, I think where you just touched base at with him going out on his own terms is as good as it's gonna get. I can't really add anything to that. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. You ain't got to do that. I just want to make sure we were all good before I wrapped it up. So, thank you guys. And if you've got any questions or any comments, let's have a conversation about this down below in the comments channel. If you like all this stuff or you think that someone else is going to like it, give us a like, comment, subscribe, and share us with some of your Bigfoot friends out there. And until next time, we are the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization, and you all have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.